without further ado, I'd like to pass you on to Dr. Anino Emua, who has basically lit up Africa for us. And we're so grateful for all of her work and all of her support. Truly a force of nature coming out of Africa. So grateful to partner with her and Africa Women CEOs Roundtable and 100 Women at Davos. So thank you so much for all the work that you do, and please take it away.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and it's gone so well so far, and we're totally delighted to join you today, 100 Women at Davos. Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this session on leadership. I think if there's anything that has come out of this pandemic is the importance of leadership, and not just leadership, global leadership. And by global leadership, what do we mean? We mean the ability of people working across borders, and people are working across borders in order to solve some of the most complex problems the world has ever seen. I think that we can say without a doubt that the pandemic, which there hasn't been a pandemic in over 100 years, and this is probably the most pressing problem that the world has seen. And as we look at leadership, the notion of leadership has evolved, not in terms of what leadership is, we all know what it is, but what are those qualities of leadership that we need in today's world. Now, this is a topic, I'm sure we can talk about this for the next few hours or days, but we're going to address it in one short hour. And in order to address it, we have a wonderful panel here. We want to hear the voice of women. And the question very often is this: why women? And it's simply because women very often have been left out of the conversations. And what we have seen without a doubt in the pandemic is the role of women in leadership. Women, the countries that were led by women performed better. And interestingly enough, one of the lady who wrote the article, Aviva Wittenberg-Cox, is a friend of the house. And that article in Forbes has been read 8 million times. And hi, Louis. And just in case we think that it was just an article in Forbes, it has been researched by researchers to understand and look at and say, what is it about female leadership that presented those results? And what we are hearing and what we are learning is that about leadership is that leadership isn't, hi Mandeep, welcome. Leadership isn't gendered in the ways that we thought about it. That is to say, the qualities of leadership are universal. And that is what we want to discuss in this panel. First of all, I'd ask quite kindly to our panelists, if you don't mind, to make sure all your microphones are off, just to stop, a feedback. And but at the same time, make sure that when you're speaking, that you actually put your microphones on. Now, without further ado, and we have our panelists here, and now I am in a power cut, and hopefully it'll come back in a few minutes. So leadership must transcend gender, right? And indeed focus on the critical qualities needed to effectively lead and build a highly diverse and inclusive workforce, creating the products and services, right, that are needed for a sustainable future. And I think the two things that we talk about in leadership in today's world important are sustainable leadership and inclusive leadership. And we have these amazing speakers here who are going to talk about all of that. But just before I start, I would like them from the perspective of leadership. And this is where the challenge is, but then that's why they're leaders. In just 1 minute to tell us about themselves as leaders. Now, I am going to start because I do not want to give my speakers a challenge that I can't meet. And in fact, I intend to do it in 30 or 40 seconds, okay? So my name is Anino Emua. I'm the founder and managing director of Avantis Consulting, which is a strategy and financial advisory firm. I am also the founder of Communities of Women in Business, including 100 Women at Davos, who is hosting this panel, and also African Women CEO. Leadership is fundamental to what we do, and gender diversity is critical. And that is one of my roles, to advance gender diversity in leadership. But diversity is broader than gender, and we're going to hear about that in this wonderful panel from across the world. I can't believe we have so much diversity in just one panel. So on that note, we'll start with the introductions from our panels. I've given them the challenge. They have 1 minute. And the reason why I'm doing so is selfish, because I want you to speak also about other things. Because everybody here who's listening is going to go to your profiles and read all about you. So on that note, who is going to offer to be the first and introduce herself? Shivi, fantastic.
Problem. So actually, I'll start with an anecdote. If you imagine me as a 12-year-old with pigtails, running around the house, grabbing my dad's massive, at that point, this is, ages ago, because I'm in my late 30s now, unwieldy Sony Cam, hoisting it on my shoulders and interviewing anyone that would listen. That was really where the child in me that stayed till today understood what it meant to lead, in the sense of at least lead with thought, to be able to command a room, to be able to ask the questions that matter. And that, I think, is a key attribute of leadership. There are a lot of qualities we can speak about, but I do believe that we've got to be able to ask the right questions and know what to ask, where to look. I am what they call a forecaster or a futurologist, and I look at things like, what are the most pivotal jobs of the future we need to learn about? What's in store for workplace learning? How can we make sure neurodiversity is part of the leadership agenda? Which discoveries about our brain chemistry could actually help us earn and learn better and lead in a much more positive way? So I look at digital psychology and neuroscience, and I break these down in my broadcasts and keynotes to audiences across the world. And I do a lot of work with the United Nations, the Office of the Mayor of London, places like the BBC and Microsoft. But mostly, I believe in championing the ethical oversight of emerging innovations and making sure the leadership reflects that. And you're on.
Thank you, Shivi. And our next speaker to introduce herself. Mihaela.
I cannot see everyone. I do not know if anyone raised their hands, but here I am now. What I wanted to appreciate, first of all, Anino, that you showed us what it means to lead by example. So you did it first. I think that is a very important component of leadership. My name is Mihaela Ulieru, and my role is strategic impact leader. Guess what? At Cardano, which is one of the most popular blockchains known these days. When it comes to leadership, I think, and because this panel is more about, of course, traits which females can bring, I think an important component is to listen. And a good leader is definitely a follower. To me, leadership and leadership by example means to support everything you do around, and everyone and everything around yourself to flourish, be they people, projects, nature. So empowering your people like you did now and allowed us to step in to introduce ourselves versus dictating who goes next. Of course, there's more to say, but I wanted to commend you for your initiative, not only in this panel, but also with 100 women in Davos. You are leadership personified, Anino. Thank you.
Dr. Mihaela Ulieru, that is really high praise indeed, honestly. I'm embarrassed at this stage. Okay, quickly moving on, thank you. Our next, Ida, I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to say hello to you. And hi, Ida, welcome. And we're really glad to have you with us. So who's next?
I'm happy to go.
Yasmin.
My name is Yasmin El-Baghari, and I'm speaking to you live from the Mediterranean Sea in Morocco. And to me, leadership is really about embodiment. It's about really listening to ourselves first, and then see what emerges, and be able to move with the wind, with the sea, with the waves, and be able to just in a way, dance through life in a graceful, loving, kind way, at the same time being effective in our missions. And I do that. My mission personally is about bringing people together across the world to facilitate meaningful cultural exchange toward peace and cultural understanding and love, ultimately. And it's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Yasmin. And our next speaker, please.
I don't mind. Thank you. Thank you. I have to echo what Michaela said. And, you and the way you're inclusive and bring everyone, you embody, you empower and give voice to everyone. And that's huge. And that's why this is called Amplify Her Voice. And that's why you created 100 Women of Davos. And that's why you, on Clubhouse and everywhere I've seen you and everywhere I've been with you, you have led 1 million women up on stage with you. It's never about you, and it's quite incredible. And I have to echo what everyone else has also said in terms of communication, asking the right question, embodiment. And I come from it from a values perspective. My name is Dr. And I, in my book, have looked at all the countries that we've mentioned so far, and 101 of them, in fact, and look at the different values that we can choose from and ourselves in order to lead being our most kind of authentic self, looking at what really matters to us, what resonates with us. What is it that you want said at your eulogy, and how are you spending your time? And is it in resonance with how you want to be? Are your aspirational values leading you, as opposed to what society is telling you or what your peer group is telling you? And I think more important here on International Women's Day and week and month, that we give ourselves that space and freedom to dream, to then create and support one another to make ambitions and aims come true through action. So thank you for always being so action orientated, and it's really good to be here and an honor.
Thank you, Mandeep. Honestly, with all of this now, I can't believe we're just only at the introduction stage, with all the thoughts already about leadership. Fantastic start. Our next speaker to introduce herself. I'm going to choose now. Lois, I'm going to choose you, and you know why I'm going to choose you. So there you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lois. Yeah. My name is Lois Aucha, a human rights advocate with over 10 years experience in disability rights advocacy at the national, Pan-African, and global level. I'm a woman with 99.9 abilities. I see my disability as an opportunity to change the world. I'm a 2014 Mandela Washington Fellow, 2017 YGL of the World Economic Forum. I'm a 2016 Ashoka Change Maker Scholar. I'm the chair of Network of Disabled Women. And I believe in 5D, which are dream, desire, dedication, delivery, and destiny. And I also believe in 5 E's, which are education, enablement, empowerment, engagement, and employment. For me, leadership means a lot to me. It means taking responsibility. It means influence. It means honesty. It means integrity and quality. Do you believe that during the pandemic in 2020, it was women that reached out to me? Federal Minister of Women Affairs personally called me and asked Lois ability. She Minister and Minister Humanitarian Affairs. These three women gathered 3,000 palliatives. They took steps. They made sure that women with disabilities did not go hungry. And this 3,000 packs of palliatives was able to reach out to 6 area councils in Abuja and other states like Kaduna, Lagos, Ekiti, Kwara, and Plateau State. So you could see that women.
We've lost Lois there. I know that her connection was a bit poor, but hopefully she'll come up. She'll come up again. But just to quickly finish on that, Lois and I have been trying to meet since Davos in January last year. And this is why we're actually laughing, because we're finally meeting, but we're meeting virtually. And Ida, delighted to have you here with us. Thank you. And we'd love to hear about you. Introduce yourself within the context of leadership, and then we'll continue the panel. Welcome, Ida.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anino. And I'm honored to be here amongst all these heartfelt, intelligent, reflective voices. It's kind of, you've been like pointing and naming something existential in leadership, and that is just so, again, love, integrity, truthful. So thank you so much for being here. So I started a platform called Catapult Future Fest. It's a conference we're now developing in more to be like a inflector machinery for focusing on consciousness, technology used for good, and impact investing. And as part of that, there is a huge community around Catapult where we continuously have, I would say, a strategy on like just holding space, just being there for the community and opening up these conversations. And I think the conversations on leadership, like even the last 5 years, has changed a lot, and maybe has accelerated with COVID, because I think COVID also kind of just, it made it visible that human that women, the compassion in women, the collectiveness, the thing in women that is like, there is a crisis, we need to talk about it, we need to be transparent about it, and we need to support each other. And I think that the future has been female for a while, because this traits, that notion in women, it's something that has been underlying and wanting to kind of bubble up to the surface. But now with this last year, I just think it just became so visible, so obvious. And that's what I truly, truly feel now, the strength of. And I think I have been brought up with a wonderful father and 2 older brothers. So I really like have so good role models as men. But now it's the first time this year I was thinking for myself, I am so supported, I'm so proud, I'm so glad that I'm a woman in 2020, 2021. And I think that feeling of love and sisterhood is growing globally. And that's what I feel that we need more of in this global shift that we hopefully can accelerate towards a better and more equal world for everyone.
Thank you so much, Ida, for that. And Lois, welcome back. And Lois, just to say, don't worry, if you go off, as long as you come back, it's fine. We will accommodate that. And I'd like to say to those people who are listening, take a screenshot, right? And so that you can remember all the names of these amazing women follow them on LinkedIn. You really need to know about what it is they are doing. These are all power, wonderful, amazing women from all parts of the world, in all sectors, different sectors. It's amazing. Now, Ida, you have taken us to our first question. So it's good that you ended this part of it, and then next part of it, and it's a wonderful introduction. Now, before we go, this is about the future of leadership. But before we get to the future, let's just take a step back, just very briefly, only as an introduction, then we can go into the meat of things, which is simply this. In one sentence, okay, what have you learned? What have you learned about leadership from the pandemic, okay? What have you learned about leadership from the pandemic? And literally just one line, because we want to build on that going forward and talk about the future, not about the past. Now I'm just going to randomly start, and I'll just start with Shivi. Shivi, what have you learned in one sentence from the pandemic?
One sentence. So I'm good at doing things succinctly. For me, the pandemic has actually opened up and unlocked a pretty interesting leadership opportunity in that we're seeing what I like to call the rise of the moral economy, where leaders are starting to show a lot more awareness and then articulating that as well, what responsibility really vest in them and their organizations in the communities in which they operate, and about time.
That's fantastic. The rise of the moral economy, fantastic. Love.
Will you name us, or we just go?
Sorry, actually, Yasmin, and then just go. Okay, just to warm things up.
To me, it's been about letting go of everything that we've learned and unlearning to step into a new way of being and collaborating and being in this world.
Actually taking notes. I don't know about our audience, but I'm taking notes. Fantastic.
I can go next if you'd like.
Okay. Oh, Mandeep, please go next, Mandeep, please.
In terms of leadership, I have seen a real shift in values, actually. I've seen a shift towards collaboration, compassion, community. And I could really summarize all of it by the sense of those leaders that are making a difference, of those leaders that are able to really be empathetic and know what empathy is and work with empathy. Out. Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay.
To take on from there, I think what I learned goes very well, if I may. How interdependent we are. I think that's the next level. My life depends on you, and yours depends on my behavior. So if I wear a mask, if I keep my distance from you, if I care. So caring and interdependence, the role of those two pivotal factors.
Thank you, Mihaela. Okay, Ida?
I was thinking, and there's many things I think we all have learned from this pandemic and leadership, but I don't know why, but I think transparency is one thing that has kind of come clear for me. When I see how the governments that have been handling this the best is the women that is able to be transparent and communicating clearly in the situation of a crisis.
Thank you. And Lois?
Dr. Annie, again.
Oh, my apologies. That's true. You came in. My question was, in one sentence, what have you learned about leadership? What new thing have you learned about leadership from the pandemic?
Oh, okay. For me, during the pandemic, leadership means taking responsibility. I have seen women that took up responsibilities and took care of women with disabilities. in the FCT, in the Plateau, in Lagos, Ekiti, Kwara State, Kaduna State. These three women are powerful. They are three federal ministers, Honorable Minister of Women Affairs, Honorable Minister of the FCT, and Honorable Minister of Humanitarian. They made sure preventive materials and palliatives reach out to women with disabilities. So for me, leadership means taking responsibility.
But you know, thank you for that, Lois. But you know, one thing underlying a lot of this is really that representation matters, diversity matters, right, in leadership. Absolutely. Okay, now moving on from there, I think that, you know, we're looking at now leading successfully with what we have seen, right? Looking forward, our panel actually talks about empathy. And one of the ladies has already mentioned it, and talked about equity really as well, which is all about diversity and inclusion. There is equity in all of this, right? There's equity, there's justice. Now, if we just say that we look at some of the skills, because one thing that we've heard and we've learned is that, or the question is, are those leadership skills, are they actually gendered, right? So let's just ask the question, what are those skills that are required of leaders in today's world to lead successfully? The floor is open, ladies.
And because this is what I want to actually underline. And yes, of course, not forgetting about empathy or anything else. But in order to display the empathy through leadership, we need an important component. And here is where you gave us a chance, Dr. Anino, with raising our hands or just stepping in. And that is courage. I think we as women, we, you know, far too often succumb to the male dominance and, you know, just listen, because we are self-sacrificing as mothers, as colleagues. We are supportive. This is what we know. But courage is very important. The courage to lead, to step up, and exactly as you say, lead by example, by walking your talk. And what I have seen also you doing here against Dr. Anino, because you are my example here. So courage has, you know, is the kernel of encouragement. So I see you doing that, not only through this panel, but how you are, you know, inviting us to speak at this panel. So it's very important. Both are very important, to encourage your team as well as to lead and show them what it means to actually act on this courage.
Mihaela, that's wonderful. Courage and encouragement. I never thought about it like that. Isn't that amazing how they go hand in hand? Ladies, over to you.
I'm happy to chime in. So one of the things I study deeply is ethical oversight of emerging innovation, as I mentioned, and I really champion this and I lobby governments and organizations for it. And it struck me in your question that I could make a little bit of a parallel connection there. You know, so I talk heavily about software and AI and the importance that it should not overtake human potential. We've got to keep the human in the equation and allow digital engineering to do that. So where leadership then comes in, I think, is some of the traits that I don't believe that, for example, you know, AI can do. AI cannot replicate human consciousness, intuition, empathy, persuasion, social intelligence, novel thinking. Those are some of the 4 or 5 key traits that I do believe are also a little bit gender agnostic, I'd say. And I've seen it in people as young as 17 or 18, rallying the people around them. The ability, I think, to sort of connect, to catalyze, and to act as a real conduit and mechanism, so that you open up the stage and you open up a platform and you go, you know what? here's the way. It's not just me leading it. It's not leadership just being vested in me because I run the company or I'm part of the board, let's say, but leadership as much more of a collective. And so within that, the traits that come in are the things that I don't believe machines or technology can actually replicate. We've got to make sure we value that and elevate that human potential with intuition, empathy, persuasion. You know, the way we're speaking to each other, I would hazard a bet that you don't want a bot sat here doing what I'm doing, where we have this human connection, the gestural communication, the inflections and intonations in tone, the nuances of human conversation. And we've absolutely got to keep that part of the leadership skill set.
In short, artificial intelligence gives us the opportunity to become really more human. Okay. Okay. Ladies, Lois, over to you.
Okay. Yes, for me, does not have gender, and the future of leadership is female, because women are transformational. They are responsible, they are influential, they are inspiration, they are committed, they are capable of taking leadership opportunities. The only thing they don't have is the opportunities and the support. So for me, women can lead, and the economy of the world improves. When women lead, the world sees positive results. Women lead, she empowers. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Do you know women contribute 21% of any country's GDP? And according to the Harvard review recently, $20 trillion in the annual spending in the world are controlled by women. And in the next 5 years, if women are given those opportunities or positions, it will rise to $28 trillion. So what are we saying? Women are the best managers. They are world changers. They are the best economists in the world. So for me, the future of global leadership is female. Thank you.
Lois, thank you very much for bringing in the female economy and the size of the female economy, who someone says, you know, is bigger than the opportunities that the businesses see in China and India combined. Okay, so we still have, on this note, we still have Ida and Yasmin, I believe. Oh, and Mandeep. Okay, Mandeep.
Yeah, I don't at this point. I couldn't agree more with Lois that women need to be given the opportunity. 1% of women, that's the percentage of leaders that are female, and these leadership qualities aren't gendered. But equally, the other 94% that are being led, where men are leading, none of the female qualities or the female values or things that seem to come easier to women, whether it be nurturing or caring or listening or being empathetic, there aren't skills exclusively for women. Everyone has the divine feminine and masculine. And so each and one of these kind of values or skill sets could be employed by either. But I do think it's a time to shift more towards those feminine qualities, because they are the ones that are making the difference. And they're the ones that are lacking. And they're the ones, as we're building the new normal in this new world that we're creating, it's an opportunity that our planet is truly being nurtured, is truly sustainable, will work for all the population. And equality is such a huge word. Why wouldn't we strive for equality? How can we allow even greater inequality after the pandemic? This one huge global equalizer. We can now hopefully capitalize on this reset button so that we all equally can move forward. And I think that this is one opportunity in which, I work with companies like the FTSE 100, I work in business schools and academia, I work with all kinds of media institutions. This is one moment where all of these different sectors and segments, to your point, Anino, you have people from all sectors and industries here on this panel. This is also a moment for collaboration, not only across the world, but also across industries. And that sense of silos, these silos, now there's an opportunity to break them so that we're one global humanity together, stronger together.
Thank you, Mandeep. And there's something that I'd like to say, and maybe we should do that offline, is to say, for each member of this panel, right, who did you know before this panel, or at least in the last, say before this year? Because we are all saying the same thing in different ways, different aspects, and yet we don't all know each other. Isn't that amazing? And given our backgrounds, Ida, I'm dying to hear from you.
Oh my God, I just loved what you just pointed out and emphasized for us all, because that's the true shift. And I was sitting here thinking and listening to you all, and I don't know, maybe to be a little bit spiritual about it, here's what I thought. It's like, it's the climate, like it's Mother Earth. She is, or Mother Nature, she is female. And then I think someone else earlier today said transformation, like we women, we go through this transformation every single month, which makes us extremely resilient. We change. And in this complexity of our time, that resilience, that ability to change with, the Mother Nature, I think that's where we can stay steady in the change, have focus in the change, have compassion, have clarity in the, unpredictable. And that's something that of course, it can be trained for everyone, but for me, it's something about that. It's just inherently in us women. And I think that's the kind of spark or the notion that the world really needs now. Having empathy, compassion, collaborative, embodied love, and leading from a place of oneness with nature.
May say values which are not necessarily acknowledged and respected and praised. And this is not only about empathy, but there's so much, because Lois mentioned this economy, which women carry on their shoulders, and they're doing a really great job at it. But so much is, unacknowledged, unpaid work. Yeah, we raise the future generations, and nobody gives, any praise. Of course, maybe, but not from the perspective which we heard here. So I'm always, with all you.
Thank you, Mihaela and Ida. Yasmin, have you commented on this point yet?
Yeah, I've been listening, and it's beautiful what's happening even right here, right now. I'm very touched by our coming together, because one thing I have learned deeply this last year, I intentionally moved to the Mediterranean because I wanted to let go of all the noise and just be in silence. And what I've learned is the more we let go of all the conditioning of how we should be, and the busyness and the chaos and just come back to ourselves as women, we have the answer within us. Leadership is within. And then we just move through the world in a beautiful and graceful and powerful way, and we get things done, but in a joyful way. We don't have to be, so busy. Like, we can just love the process of transformation and change in our communities across the globe in a beautiful and connected and, playful way. So that's been my reflection as I'm listening to you. So it really is an honor to know all of you today in this moment, and hopefully we may meet someday in person together.
Yasmin, thank you, ladies. That has been so absolutely beautiful, what you have said, so touching, really. And, one thing, I'm going to move a little bit forward to a certain point and come back, and you'll understand. But it's simply this: how did we create a world whereby the yardstick of importance is accorded to things that have this, shall we say, economic value, or rather economic value is measured by some monetary value? That is to say, the reason why women and what women have done forever has been undervalued is because somehow an economic value has not been placed on it. And therefore, we have been in a situation where we have almost been forced to suppress that which makes us women, right? Because it doesn't have that economic value. And yet here we are today, right? And all those things, collaboration, community, empathy, these are all the things we've done forever, okay? But I think more and more as women, right, are entering into the economy in terms of jobs, in terms of resources, in terms of capital, we're seeing that those values are coming more and more. And just a last note, and just to say this, and this is where I think is really important for this panel. We are at a moment where women have suffered, right, disproportionately during the crisis, on the one hand. On the other hand, we've had amazing examples of firsts of women in top leadership. And I think that we need to deal with both, okay? Which is to say, how do we deal with the fact that women are suffering from violence to losing jobs to lack of finance? And then we have these women. To me, it's all part of the same thing. We have to use our positions of power and influence to make change happen in the way Lois has described, where the female ministers were the ones who came to her to talk about women with disabilities and not the men. On that note, this is the question on that note. Looking at inclusion, it is such a wide term. It means so many things, but I think that it's important that we talk from our own perspectives on inclusion. And there is that awareness of the critical importance of inclusion or inclusivity and the practice or policy of providing equitable access, right, to opportunities. We've spoken about opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. It's not a question, it's a statement. But I'd like to hear your views on that, which is inclusion has become so important, right? Equal access, opportunities. It's been a theme through the pandemic, and we have different understandings of inclusion, right? And I'd just like to hear from your perspectives. We don't have all the time in the world, but, with the time we have, I'd love to hear from you on that. Okay, how do we promote inclusion? Okay.
If I could, it's just a short comment, and it's always so difficult to discuss this, and I think this is not my pure expertise, but one thing I'm thinking about is like, do we need to respect ourselves? I'm not only talking about women, but I'm talking about the humankind. It's like we don't respect and honor humans in this culture that we are in. If we could just do that, will inclusion kind of solve itself? It might seem a little bit utopian or naive coming from that place, but for me, it's like something existential that, do we respect ourselves enough in this on this planet.
And Ida, to your point, neuroscience, and one of the things that actually comes up there is what actually happens in your brain when you feel accepted, when you feel invited, when you feel part of something. What does it actually engage? And there's actual physical evidence that supports the science of inclusion even, is that your dopamine receptors, something called neuropeptin, lights up. That then sends a pathway firing off somewhere else. That feeling when people say, gosh, I just got this feel-good feeling all over my body. I felt lit up. And there's a clear market difference between feeling that way. And in some cases, I think most of us will have gone through it. Myself, I'm from a BAME background. I'm an immigrant to the UK. I've been here 14 years, but I'm often reminded that I'm not from here. And this is not just from men. This is sometimes from women as well, unfortunately. But there's such a difference, I feel. You walk out of a room and your shoulders sag, and it is actually a brain chemistry that surges through your body. When you say you feel deflated, I find myself saying to my husband sometimes, I came off that call. I can't explain it. I just feel deflated in myself. And I really want to rally myself to get back on and move past it. And other times, like this session, it is 7:20 here. I've had 4 hours of sleep. I've got 2 little toddlers. I'm running a forecasting lab. But you guys have lit me up. I'm going to go off the back of this and be supercharged for the evening and go to bed just feeling a shift. And this is on a molecular level. It isn't just philosophical. Science proves that when we feel included, and the act of being included and the act of including, of inviting someone to be part of something, part of a cohort, is extremely powerful. And that comes with that whole notion of paying it forward. So those of us that are doing this today, it's taken a heck of a lot of courage and hard graft for us to even be in some position of having a decision-making capacity. And as you rightly said, Anino, there are plenty of women who don't right now. The single parent with 2 children who's out of a job. I have a cousin in India who's really struggling, or a friend who's going through debilitating psychological weakness, but has to stand up as the MD of an investment bank and make it out that everything is fine, but she's crumbling inside. And these are those untold stories that if all of us pay it forward a little more, I think you'll find these real stories of people who need that inclusion, and helping people even, get past imposter syndrome, which is something that is rife amongst women. 8 times, it disproportionately affects women as well. The fear of, do I even belong here? Oh my God, do I belong in this room? Yes, I've achieved all this, but all right. And it's shocking how many people that affects as well.
Ladies, on inclusion.
I just want to take on from there and just mention that there's this word Shivi described. So that was a toxic conversation, and it encapsulates so much of what's going on. Also at work, with our male colleagues and their attitude towards us. And someone mentioned here about women's resilience. Well, we grew to be very resilient to this kind of things because we are still here and we made it in leadership positions. And therefore, to me, this is a responsibility. Yes, my male colleagues may include me or not. However, they may also marginalize me, but then it's also my accountability to step up my game and actually help in shifting that toxicity into empowerment, into praise. So for others, by example, I know, it's maybe sounds much easier than it is when it's done, but I'm doing this every day. So, and yes, to Ida, sorry if I misspelled your name, but yes, it is a matter, inclusivity and inclusiveness is a matter of human dignity. And we forgot that this is not only for us, for myself, but for everyone around me. And it's not only for the human species, but for nature and everything on this planet and in the universe.
Thank you, Mihaela. I'd like to go on to another question, or rather another point. And this is actually now moving on to the Mandeep.
And, just to add one quick thing on inclusive. I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said. I find that when you are not included, when that value is violated, then you feel a sense of injustice, and then you realize how important it actually was. Ask those people who didn't want Brexit to happen how it felt when that actually occurred, or ask anyone on the playground alone, which is happening to each and every one of us. There's this moment that occurs where, oh, I don't belong here. And it's almost one of the worst feelings in the world. And it almost creates an immediate jar that then we spend our life in that pattern. And I really want to just praise countries like Bhutan that have chosen to look at gross national happiness rather than GDP, rather than gross domestic product. Because when are we going to take a step back and say human being is allowed? It's not always human doing. It's not just about our productivity, that we are human beings first and foremost, and our happiness, fresh air, clean water, human dignity, all these basic rights are what we should focus on first and foremost. So I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but I really felt quite passionately about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandeep, for your contribution. And the next question is this, and talking now about practical strategies of inclusion. And deliberately, I'm going to start with Lois on that. What are the practical things that we can do to encourage inclusion? Lois. Your mic? We can't hear you.
For me, inclusion means educating our leaders. It means establishing or forming a coalition on inclusive activities. It also means involving the vulnerable groups to participate actively in all spheres of life. Is it education, health, economic empowerment, transport systems? All these sectors need to be accessible and inclusive to everyone. It also means implementation of policies and legal frameworks from the local to the global level. For disability community, we have United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We have Article 6 for women with disabilities. And we have other articles on the rights of persons with disabilities. So inclusion means participation. It means promoting institutional change and creating legal and policy environment. It means enablement. It means removal of all barriers. For instance, I'm a wheelchair user. Wheelchair cannot stop me from being productive. But when I go to your office and I don't have ramps or I don't see ramps, that means you're stopping me from being productive. So who is now disabled? Attitudinal change. We want to see inclusivity in our hospitals. A deaf woman cannot communicate with a medical practitioner because there's no sign language interpreter. And when we're talking about inclusivity, there should be sign language interpreters at the strategic point for deaf patients to be able to communicate with medical practitioners with confidentiality. So inclusion means a lot to me. I want to see ramps. I want to see sign language interpreters. I want to see our phones being inclusive to the visually impaired with screen readers. I want to see Braille being accessible to the visually impaired students, and so many things to talk about inclusion. Thank you.
at the heart of what you're saying is that inclusion is about removing barriers. And I think we need to think about inclusion and say that inclusion is not simply about enabling, because it behoves on you to enable. We should not create in the first place those situations that exclude, right? So the other side of inclusion is exclusion. When we don't include, what we're actually doing is we're actually excluding. Okay, ladies, we actually have just 2 minutes more, and I'll just see if, and Yasmin, why do I think you have been a little bit quiet? Am I right?
I'm very good at listening.
You're very good at listening. Okay, so maybe I shall direct my last question, right, to Yasmin, okay? And which is this? Our closing comments, very simply. What do you see as the most critical need for leadership now as the world resets? So one need, the most critical, prioritize. Okay, Yasmin, perhaps you can kick it off.
Well, absolutely. What comes to heart is that we must be willing to tell the truth in all aspects. And be very
simple, but isn't it difficult? Thank you. Simply
Yes,
put,
exactly.
beautiful. Okay. Ladies? I can see the brain cells churning. Shivi, we haven't heard from you for a few minutes.
I mean, I've been quite talkative, but actually I'm almost in this trance listening to so many unified voices. What's also fantastic, as I think Mandeep and Mihaela pointed out, is even the act of this, within this frame we're all in. I'm seeing these 4 corners, and then I suddenly see so many more 4 corners, and I think, wow, this feels like a movement. And so, I mean, I would just say in my closing comment, even what we're doing here, it may feel like it's blink and you'll miss it, or it's a one-off, but actually for people watching, for those of us in it, it will spur and catalyze something. And so I would just say thank you so much for bringing this conversation together. This in a declaration or a sort of example of inclusivity, because I'll bet you if we dug deeper than we have today, we've gone pretty deep already, between us in this room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us, we'd have these really fascinating stories of, what hasn't enabled us. So enablers, and also what has held us back. And the fact that we've been able to come together and do this, that's an inclusion in itself. So thank you for rallying that.
Shivi. Mandeep?
Yeah, I would just say that if, our decisions, leaders' decisions, but all of our individual decisions are being made according to our values, subconsciously and in our consciousness. So if we just gave ourselves a little bit of space to really examine what it is that's driving us, I think the leadership for a future would be in a very different place. So that would be my closing remark. But maybe we don't have to close. Maybe we have another 15 minutes for Q&A.
Yes, we will have time to talk more during the Q&A. Ida, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Mihaela, is that how I pronounce the name? I really love how you kind of grasp what I said earlier and put the word dignity on it. And I think actually I'm sitting with this strong sense after this conversation about that we need to take back the dignity of the humankind. And I'm not only thinking about us as humans, but together with the planet, and then have dignity for Mother Earth together with us. So I think the future needs a sense of renewed dignity for all beings and nature.
The dignity, absolutely dignity. You talked earlier about respect, and now we're talking about dignity. Amazing. Mihaela, the last one on this, and then we're going to the sort of the post session, right? Okay.
I would say it is, of course, all of the above, and therefore holistic thinking. And this, as I'm thinking about holistic thinking, which is anyway a trait which we women have, because we have to juggle so many things at once, job, family, balance of everything. So how do we see and to bring to our awareness our impact on everything, on our fellow humans, on nature, and on everything? This is, I believe, a trait which leadership in the Great Reset must have.
Thank you. So we have it from the ladies, the formal part of our session. We are going to continue, but I'd just like to say to those in the room, if you have any questions, pop them in the box and we will address them. Whilst we're waiting for questions, we're talking about the future. We're talking about leaders. We're talking about amazing women who are here moving the needle honestly. And so I think I want to go back to each of you to ask you personally, okay, so the question is, so what are you doing to bring about the change that we see? So I know we know about your work, all right? So within the context, what is that thing or what is behind that thing that you're doing that will bring about change in the future of leadership for the sustainable, inclusive world we're talking about in the era of this great reset? Okay.
I practice self-love and truly take self-love as a practice and embodying that in a way that is not selfish. And that we women can actually say that practicing self-love is something that supports us in putting healthy boundaries around ourselves, and from that place being able to lead from a place of authenticity, of love, and from a full cup.
Ladies.
I'm happy to chime in. So one of the things I kicked off last year, I called it Humanity 5.0. And I found that people were saying, okay, I get the humanity part. What do you mean by 5.0? And so sometimes I found I had to explain it a little bit. But I've ended up turning this almost into a campaign. And what it is I study the fourth industrial revolution. I look at all these emerging innovations from data science, from AI, how to humanize them. And I thought, actually, I had this opportunity to be called on by some of these really fascinating organizations, right from larger ones to governments. And maybe I'm missing a trick if when I do my masterclasses or keynotes or advise them on digital transformation, I'm not actually putting some accountability on their radar that one of their deliverables needs to be D&I, so more diversity and inclusion, but crucially not farming it off to the CSR division or HR, which we found, I think, is the most common thing. In the same way, digital transformation gets pushed to the CTO and the IT team, and it's seen as an IT challenge. But digital transformation is actually about people as much as it is about which digital infrastructure, which new email software, which AI tool are we going to work with to maximize productivity. And you're like, well, what about the people behind it? And so the culture part is also important there. So what I'm trying to do with Humanity 5.0 is I've turned it into a masterclass that I've actually offered out through, I have an agent that books me the speaking work. Initially, I thought, no one's going to buy that. They're going to think we want the more tangible stuff on leading in a digital transformation or the 4 breakthrough technologies that you need to use in your organization, which also really have an important place because they're all tech for good, which is still good. However, this has received the most uptake of all, and the number of people I have that get in touch with my agent, and these are big companies, these are smaller organizations who go, the Humanity 5.0 thing that Shivi's doing, I've not heard that before. Actually, tell me more about it. And I think the pandemic has spurred a little bit of, I won't say softness, but a little bit more of a nobility and a gentleness in us. It's taken a little bit of the edge of even some of those the people that have machismo and that alpha character where they think that's all they need to plow ahead. And they won't necessarily look at who's behind them. And suddenly these people are going, oh, actually, if I've got to be a responsible leader, I probably need to walk the talk. So that's what I'm trying to do with the Humanity 5.0 campaign. It's turned into a bit of a campaign of its own. And then through the inroads I get with companies, the same way Mandeep is called on, I know, by some great places and people, I'm like, by the way, have you thought about? And they're like, okay, fine. Now that you've kind of come in on the conversation around how do we make our businesses stronger, actually, we'll listen to what else you have to say. So I think for those of us that can step in that door, speaking their language, and these are, like let's say big companies, but then go, by the way, here's some of the responsibilities you're not really paying attention to. Hopefully, we find that it finds its way somehow in strategy and in actual tangible outcomes.
Thank you, Shivi. One thing that I always say is that in terms of diversity and inclusion, that the CEO is actually the chief diversity officer. It's not to be found out, and it must have a budget, it must have people, and it must have KPIs, and you must measure, and you must hold people accountable. Ladies, any more contributions on this topic? That is to say, as leaders going forward, what are you doing? What is your contribution to changing or to building the future of leadership, the Great Reset?
I'm happy to share. My contribution has been, actually it's been 6 years now that I'm marching forward to this mission, connecting cultures together and people from different backgrounds and perspectives. And so we collaborate with universities, with governments, with companies, connecting their members from across different parts of the world to encourage this deeper understanding of one another. So concretely, right now, I'm working with the community of youth and from Africa and the Middle East, connecting them together in a virtual setting, which really enables them to see their interconnectedness with the world and solutions with each other. And on the other hand, I'm working with Harvard University, bringing together students and alumni. And so for me, it's really about, any community is comprised of humans. So I connect communities and eventually interconnect these communities into the human global community, which is everybody, where you actually don't need to be part of a community because you belong here on Earth. You don't need to be, it's just, everyone, any stranger in the world is your family. And so that's kind of my way of, that's my why, what I'm doing.
Wow. Thank you, Yasmin. Isn't that amazing to say that, we are all here, so we all belong. So we don't need to actually say and define these are communities, right? Because when you do that, in a sense, sometimes you're excluding. So we all need to know that we are part of this whole thing, We all have a role or a place. Thank you. Ladies, any other contributions? Mandeep, I see your book.
Yeah. Well placed, right? I was just thinking that with all the opportunities we have, whether it's speaking, as Shivi was saying, whether it's collaborating, was saying, with universities or governments or schools or all of the above that we do, I think it's being able to pay each and every one of those opportunities. So everywhere I go or everywhere I am, I think, which other woman can benefit from this? Who else could I open a door for? Who could be in my shoes, or even better, who could be like you do, Amina, and so that this is not just a one-off. It's not just tokenism. It's not just because it's the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year or because we're in a pandemic, but so that this is really a change that we are making for our daughters and our granddaughters and our great-granddaughters, so that we don't have to keep fight. I mean, diversity is such an obvious. We are making services and products for both parts of society, for men and women. So why wouldn't there be diversity in every level of organization? Why are we still having to even debate that or think about that or argue for that? Why are we still having to say 30% on boards? Why isn't it obvious that it should be 50-50? If we really want a wholesome, inclusive community or environment, or we're making products that are for, or services that are for humanity, then may humanity be represented right from the get-go. Otherwise, we don't even know the problem that we're solving for. stage. So it's almost insane that we're having to debate it. And I think we have to get to that point where we say it is obvious that it gives back to ROI, that this brings return on investment, that this is better for the bottom line. We're not debating that anymore. Now, let me CFO who's not difficult to find. Let me give you your next marketing officer who's eager to work and ready for this. So it's just paying it forward, I think, for me. Thank you.
I want to go back to something you said earlier and take that into my next question, or probably my last question, actually, which is you talked about those coming behind us and young women and girls. And I think that, it's important for those that are listening. This is going to get recorded, and I bet it's going to be watched, widely. Simply this is, what advice do you have for young women and girls? Shall we start from Mihaela? We haven't heard from you for a few minutes there.
Yes, I would say yes. Stand up for yourself and be the change you want to see in the world in this regard. This is the only advice. And I also, just to take on from what was said before, I think we have a very important role in focusing attention of humanity on humanity, exactly what the Humanity 5.0. And in my work, I am doing strategic impact, but I'm focusing on the SDGs, on empowering those disenfranchised, on all the issues which we discussed here. This is my call to action for the young women.
Mihaela, Ida, your advice to young women and girls?
I think, as always, stay with love, but start with the self-love. I think there's so many women out there that if we don't, it's a practice. I do a practice. I can share that. Every night before I go to sleep, I put my hand on my heart and say that I love you. It could be my spiritual body, it could be my physical body. I can say it out loud, or just inside silence, or maybe I don't say anything. I just think it or feel it, and I have my hand on my heart. And from that place, it's so much easier to speak with that, or being curious on who you are, and from that also being curious on all there is, and being, right? So.
All right, Ida. It all starts with self, doesn't it? Thank you for that. Lois, your views on this, your advice for young women and girls coming behind you. Well, you are young anyway, but still.
Yes, my simple advice for young girls and women is they shouldn't be afraid to say no. They should be confident, proactive, and they should keep on educating themselves, looking out for opportunities for training, for internships that will be able to develop themselves. Thank you.
I love that being intentional, intentionality and seeking out. There's one question which we had here, and I know that some of our speakers have talked about it, and that has to do with men and the importance, and Mandeep, you mentioned that. Simply, how do we get men into the conversation? Okay, we're talking about leadership. It concerns everybody. Over to you, Mandeep.
I don't mind speaking to that for a moment. I'm about to go to Central African Republic to cover the elections for UN Women, and the plight of women. If we're not speaking to men, if we're not talking to, those that are actually perpetrating this, there is almost no point in going. So I think that this importance of enrolling men is absolutely crucial. And just to that also your point of what are we saying to young women that are coming up, they have a lot more power than they think they do. They have power in terms of their voice, in terms of where they spend their money. They have power in they choose to take. And it is a choice. And what we're seeing is that millennials are choosing their jobs, are choosing their products, are choosing their services according to actually values. And they're showing what they will accept and what they won't accept. They won't accept misogyny, or they won't accept people being put down, or they won't accept abuse, for example. And the more we realize that we have the power to say no as well as yes, the more, and the fact that we are much more powerful together, the stronger we'll be. So thank you for that. And that's what I mean by men and women together.
Thank you, Mandeep. Thank you. Shivi?
I wanted to chime in because I was not along vociferously because it really made sense. But one of the things I was doing, looking away at my phone was, that's my 3.5-year-old daughter. Okay, she's upstairs. She's with Daddy. Daddy is the first man in her life. Like for many of us, and I mean, this is documented in psychology books galore, right? So when we talk about men being champions, what can we do to get men on board? Fathers, look out for your daughters, tell them they can do anything. And actually, my father, for instance, would sit with me and do spelling bee competitions just for fun. But he always ended it with, first of all, it's okay not to get it right. Secondly, you tried anyway. Gosh, you can do it. And one of the things that my mom had lying around in the house was a book by Susan Jeffers. My mom is the psychologist, and it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I remember as an 8-year-old going, ooh, I'm trying to get my head around that. But it made sense even then. Fear is universal, and it's at all ages. And for young women, I would say, especially to my daughter, for example, feel the fear and do it anyway. And a lot of the growth comes from, they say, at the edge of, your sort of comfort zone, don't they? And I do think it's true. A lot of the new growth starts from there. So whether it's building a business, and as Mandeep is saying, really bringing in that values ecosystem. If your parents, so your fathers, your first male figures, for those of us who have one at home, and then educators, a male teacher at work, these are the early champions you see as a young girl. And so hopefully you have a virtuous cycle that starts there. And those men end up leading in organizations. And I constantly say to my husband, imagine if one of the people on your team happen to be your daughter, for example, and not that you're leading her, but someone else is managing her. How would you rally her? How would you lift her up? And do that.
Shivi, you are so right about that, the role of fathers and daughters and fathers and their children. And I think that, one thing, the role of the man, and I think that going forward, is that we need to move the narrative, right, from this thing that concerns women, because it doesn't. It concerns humanity. And somehow we have to shift this narrative. That's a totally different discussion. We can't cover all of that in this last 5 minutes. But I think that we have enough time, I hope, to give the floor to all of you for just a minute each. Okay, a minute. And this is unusual, but it's been such a wonderful conversation that I just like to say to you, we have just 1 minute, right, to say whatever it is you want to say now. Okay, take it away. Yasmin, you look like a likely candidate, or am I picking on you?
My goodness. Well, I mean, I honestly have no words because this conversation and encounter has been inspiring and almost reminding me over and over again that the time is now, and the transformation is happening. It's happening. So we're no longer waiting. We're stepping up. We're embodying these leadership skills and showing up every single day. And we are going to rest when we're tired. And that's it. I want to just let you know that I'm so grateful that I have met you today, and I am here as a friend, as an ally, as a sister for whatever you need. If I don't know how to do it, I know someone who does. That's it. That's me.
Thank you, Yasmin. Perhaps you can take another contribution, Shivi.
High-fiving, Yasmin.
High-fiving.
I'll let someone else. I
Fantastic.
A minute already, so I'll let someone else.
Anu is here, so I'm not sure that we have much more time. Anu, so shall I give it over to you?
Yes, please. I thought they were all doing Bhangra, actually. A lot of brown people on women of color on this platform, so you never know. Exactly. Awesome. So this was fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you, and fully agree with all of your wisdom, and so grateful that you could be with us to be in this epic day and epic event of ours, and we hope you'll come back again. I think we've got so many comments today, and it was great interaction and discussion. Shivi, I totally agree with you. The father figure is so important. My little one, Anino, when we were all in meetings, attending your meetings at Davos, she was skiing from the top of the mountain to the bottom of her and she's 9 years old. So it's like, to build that confidence, to get over that fear, it's like, you know, that little one is just, you know, daddy's little girl, but she's also learning those skills now. It's just the confidence, and we know what happens when you have that. So yeah, it's important. Our next session is investing in girls. We're going to have Dr. Mara Harvey, who started Smart Way to Start. We're going to ask you all to stick around if you want to follow on in that discussion. And it's the next whole segment. I know we've been going for 3 days, but it's like the most important piece, which is investing in girls. And I know you're all champions. I have a daughter of my own, so I'm just super excited to see how we're going to actually accomplish everything that, you know, you guys have all shared with us today. So thank you all. We're going to say goodbye to our audience and to our panel, and see you in the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and just a quick goodbye, and to say to the panelists, thank you. Wow, how inspiring. A lot of food for thought, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to moderate this panel. Thank you all so much, and thank you, of course, to Anu and the rest of the team.
Anino, thank you so much. You led that beautifully.
Beautifully.
Thank you.
At Davos, you rock, and check out the State of Women Institute. We have more coming up later in 2 months. And thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, ladies. Bye.
Thank you both.